This is a street in the northwestern provinces of British India, right around 1886. At this point in history, the colonial footprint was massive, stretching across millions of square miles and encompassing hundreds of millions of people. To keep a grip on a territory that large, the administration relied on a sprawling network of prisons. Running those facilities required an absolute army of local and British officials standing shoulder to shoulder to maintain the rigid hierarchy. The management of these people relied on massive stacks of administrative circulars. These documents laid out rigid, exhaustive rules for everything from the repair of locks to the handling of raw materials and property ledgers. These specific orders from 1886 show an administration engaged in desperate damage control, written by a government that had lost faith in the very people it hired to execute its orders. The British Empire functioned through an obsessive, institutional paranoia directed squarely at its own subordinates, creating a system of control as vital to its survival as military might. The administration operated on a strict baseline assumption. The staff running the prisons were actively stealing from the state. Take a look at this document, Circular Number 18 from 1886. It explicitly addresses the problem. The Inspector General notes that raw materials are going missing, and he orders superintendents to personally count their stock to stop embezzlement, taking money directly out of the government's pocket. That economic anxiety bled into every operational detail. The administration didn't even trust their staff with the physical security equipment holding the prisons together, which led to some truly bizarre logistical mandates. Here is Circular 12. Broken high-end locks and watches couldn't be fixed locally. They were piled up and shipped thousands of miles to England. Furthermore, the administration demanded to know exactly which local official was careless enough to break it, ensuring personal accountability. This level of micromanagement makes sense when you see what they shipped. They used massive, solid brass Admiralty padlocks imported directly from Britain. They also relied on control watches like this one to track guard patrols. In practice, staff broke the very tools meant to monitor their moves. When you have to mandate a cross-global supply chain just to fix a broken watch, the implication is obvious. The central administration viewed its local operational staff as entirely incompetent, entirely corrupt, or both. To stop the bleeding of state resources, the administration tried to close every possible procedural loophole with rigid documentation. This circular addresses the intake process. It forces jailers to open a specific column in their registers to painstakingly log the personal property of inmates who haven't even been convicted yet, ensuring those belongings didn't mysteriously vanish while the prisoner was in custody. Guards and jailers were easy targets for suspicion, but the colonial distrust reached much higher up the chain of command. The empire actually lacked faith in its own judges. This is Circular Number 20. Whipping was the expected punishment for male juveniles. If a judge bypassed the whip for imprisonment, they were required to forward a written memorandum heavily justifying their mercy. The circular explicitly bans magistrates from giving conjectural reasons for leniency. The administration demanded an airtight paper trail, not for inflicting violence, but for withholding it. It is clear evidence that the central government didn't even trust its own courts to maintain the harshness required for colonial rule. This obsession with control trickled all the way down to the chemical level of prison labor. This is Circular Number 22. It outlines a strict ban on using synthetic coal tar dyes, forcing the prisons to use natural, native dyes instead. Every single woolen blanket or fabric produced behind those walls had to be perfectly chemically standardized. When you take all these isolated mandates, the registers for stolen property, the shipping logs for broken padlocks, the written justifications for judicial mercy, the precise chemical makeup of wool dyes, they start to form a larger structure. This total operational control served as a defense mechanism for an empire terrified that its system would crumble from within, fueled by the daily human errors and leniencies of its own staff. The documents left behind in 1886 show that the reality of the British Empire was an exhausting, highly paranoid bureaucracy where trust was non-existent and every single action required a written justification.